hopefully it'll be worth your time to listen here. And one thing I say it every once in a while, but I do appreciate it, being able to speak, because I consider it a privilege. And I honestly mean it when I end the lesson, that if I've said anything that's wrong, or I need to be corrected, or if I'm in error, I want to know about it. Tell me, okay? So, last week we're still talking about being a Christian and the fundamentals of being a Christian. And one of the things that the word that we were tackling last week was believe. And belief is taking me to working myself into the Gospel of Luke. And one of the things about the Gospel of Luke, let me ask you this question. Was Luke a Gentile, or was he a Jew? He was a Gentile, okay? So does that make him a little different from the other three Gospel writers? Absolutely, especially in the way he was raised. So, if we go a little bit further in this, let's just look at Luke, and let's just read the first verse in the first chapter. Or not the first verse, but let's read the first 4 verses, okay? Luke 1. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. Well, I've said this many times in the past, and I've asked this question many times in the past, and hopefully it is stuck. But for those of you that might be new or you don't know, does anybody know what the word or the name Theophilus means? No one knows. Okay. No, it's a good guess. Now, hopefully I'm going to drive a splinter up into your mind up here, and you'll remember this. Theophilus means friend of God. Okay? There's a few others that, let me turn over my notes here. That's the one that I've told people for a long time. And that's one of the things that I really wanted us to be able to know. It also means friend of God, loving God, and loved by God. Now, one other thing I wanted to add in here, in your vocabulary here, and this would be for Greek. Do you know what the word God is in Greek? Theos. Theophilus is spelled T-H-E-O. Okay? Theos is spelled T-H-E-O-S. Theophilus. So you see where this name comes from. So this isn't just some arcane name or anything like that, but it carries some importance about things. And pay attention to what it says in the 4th verse here in chapter 1. It says, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. Well, let's go back to verse 2. Just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning, what beginning is he talking about here? Of Jesus on earth, okay, beginning, were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. What do we also call Jesus? The word. It seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus. And we come back to the 4th verse. And this is where it really hits home for us. So that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. How many times have you been confronted as members of the Churches of Christ? Have you been confronted with that? Well, you guys, I don't know about you guys. You're too strict. You're too this. You're too that. You think you know it all. Anybody had that put in your face? I have many, many times. Okay? So, with that, I've chosen to go over to, and this gets closer to what we were talking about last week. I was going to cover this last week, but I realized there's too much here to try and cover. Turn to Luke 20. Now you're close enough to chapter 19, towards the end. If you'll drop down in chapter 19, let's look at verse 28, and let's read forward from there. Luke 19, verse 28. After he being Jesus, after he had said these things, he was going on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. Now, which time is he going to Jerusalem here? If we think we're going to talk to someone about the Bible. It's the 20th chapter. We're getting close to the end of Luke. Which time is he going to Jerusalem? Huh? Say again? Passover. It's Passover? But isn't this going to be his last trip to Jerusalem? If we can, we try to keep this in chronological order if we can, if we understand that. So after he had said these things, he was going on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And one of the ways you can remember this, and, well, I'll come to that in a minute. Verse 29, when he approached Bethphage and Bethany near the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of the disciples, saying, Go into the village ahead of you. There, as you enter, you will find a colt tied on which no one yet has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, Why are you untying it? You shall say, The Lord has need of it. Verse 32. So those who were sent away and found it just as he had told them, as they were untying the colt, its owner said to them, Why are you untying the colt? They said, The Lord has need of it. Verse 35. They brought it to Jesus, and they threw their coats on the colt and put Jesus on it. And as he was going, they were spreading their coats on the road. Why do you think they did that? Just think about that for a little bit. Verse 37. As soon as he was approaching near the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the miracles which they had seen, shouting, Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And here's where the story starts to thicken a little bit for us. Verse 39. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. But he answered, I tell you, if these become silent, the stones will cry out. Verse 41. When he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, If you had known in this day, even you, the things which make for peace. But now they have been hidden from your eyes. For the days will come when For the days will come upon you when your enemies will throw up a barricade against you and surround you and hem you in on every side. And they will level you to the ground and your children within you. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation. What's he make reference to here? Something's going to happen in the future. The destruction of Jerusalem. And we know from historical fact it was around 70 to 71. And it took quite a while. And I would highly recommend, we don't have time for it here, but I would highly, highly recommend that you do a study of when the Romans came and destroyed the temple. Okay? And not only destroyed the temple, but they destroyed everybody that stayed inside of it. The Jews put up a good fight, but at the end, the Romans just said, We've had enough of this. And they just annihilated the place. Okay? And what do we have standing over there today? Still has never been rebuilt, has it? And think about the thing that's been put in place that keeps them from doing that. A satanic temple is sitting right there on the grounds. It's where the Muslims put the Dome of the Rock, this gold object thing out there. Just things to consider. So in verse 45, Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling, saying to them, "It is written, and my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a robber's den." For those of you who have been in the class long enough, what's he talking about, a robber's den? Who was kind of running the show at that point in time inside the confines of the temple? Priests, Pharisees, okay? Even the Sadducees. The Sadducees were more the business people. Well, we'll come to this in just a moment here. It is written, "And my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a robber's den." Well, what's the implication he's made there? Yeah. Turned it into a business practice. And it wasn't necessarily a good business practice, was it? Okay? Why would they call them robbers? Some people might refer to bankers as robbers. But it's a legitimate business, isn't it? Okay? Some people would argue that it's not a legitimate argument. So, if you've ever been guilty of it, like I have, the heavy hand of what happens with the bank, if you happen to go broke, it's not fun, let me tell you. Experience is a great teacher on that one. So in verse 47, "And he was teaching daily in the temple, but the chief priests and the scribes and the leading men among the people were trying to destroy him." Destroy who? In the New American Standard that I'm reading from, him is capitalized with a capital H. What would that refer to? That would be refer to him, okay? "And they could not find anything they might do, for all the people were hanging on to every word he said." Hanging on to every word he said. Wow. Have you ever been around and heard or watched maybe some of the videos that you can find online, and you're hanging on every word that someone is saying? What's he going to say next? Or what is she going to say next? I want to hear more. Okay? What do you think he might have been saying? It certainly didn't seem to be going well with the chief priests and stuff, does it? Especially when he calls them robbers. Yeah. You better turn from your ways on these things. So now we get to chapter 20, okay? And I'll tell you right now, we're going to cover more chapter 20 next week, because it's the crux of the matter's coming on this, in this chapter. Chapter 20, verse 1. "On one of the days while he was teaching the people," well, wait a minute. Did he just wander into town and just kind of show up that day and then they hauled him off to hang him on the cross? What does that specifically say? On one of the days. We don't know how many days for sure, but it was more than one day. He just didn't come into town like a tornado and... Back on 47, it says he taught daily. Daily, yeah. So, see, now, I like what she did. She caught some detail. And I hate to say this, but there's that old saying, the devil is in the details. Okay? Here I'd have to modify that somewhat. God is in the details. On one of the days while he was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders confronted him. 3 sets of people right? Verse 2. And they spoke, saying to him, tell us, by what authority you are doing these things? Or who is the one who gave you this authority? Jesus answered and said to them, I will also ask you a question, and you tell me. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Verse 5. They reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, well, why did you not believe him? But if we say from men, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that John was a prophet. So they answered that they did not know where it came from. And Jesus said to them, nor will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Whoa. Now, there's a lot in this. Okay? Nor will I tell you by what authority I do these things. So what in effect, and I'm going to borrow from one of the commentaries, what in effect has Jesus done with the question that they asked him? He turned it back on them. And Brother Kaufman, I like what he wrote. He said he took their hand grenade and threw it right back in their faces. Because what was the reason for asking these questions in the first place? Just to be rhetorical and sound, yeah. It was a trap, wasn't it? A trap for what?
The people constantly wanted to find doubt in the situation. They doubted the fact that they had the authority. Some people, it looks to me that when they asked, after he performed all these things, all these miracles and everything, like there were still people that doubted it all over the world because they hadn't seen what he had done.
Well, even people that saw him. Some of the scribes, some of the other people that had been out, the priests. What did they do? They were stubborn, weren't they? What's this guy going to do for us? What's going to happen to us if the people start to believe that this is the Messiah? What happens to the priesthood? What happens inside the temple? Okay? What would happen? We have to get this guy out of the way or he's going to mess with our finances, our system. Our respect is going to be gone. They're going to know who we actually are, what's going on here. Let me pose this question. I told Jim I was going to have something political to say, but how much of that has changed today? Human nature does not change, does it? Yeah. And the more, there's that old saying, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. People just find better ways of hiding things. So if we've seen our current president come in this week, he's pretty rambunctious with people, wasn't he? Some of these interviews that were live, and boy, I mean, I guarantee you they caught them with their, with their shorts down, so to speak. What did he do? And he was fairly tactful about it in most places, but he was also firm. How was Jesus answering? So, with those thoughts in mind, let's reread let's start at verse 1 again and reread it again with these thoughts in mind. On one of the days while he was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders confronted him, and they spoke, saying to him, "Tell us by what authority you are doing these things, or who is the one who gave you this authority?" We'll stop right there. In our present situation, who gave him the authority? We the people. We the people. Okay? So they're asking, though. We're in charge. Who told you, you one single person, to come in here and start doing this? You're embarrassing us. That's one of the things that comes into play. Where did the embarrassment come from? It comes from them saying, we don't know how to answer this. We don't know. But shouldn't they know? What had they been looking for all these years? They were waiting for it. And he gives us a clue about John. What is John? They know John because they even admit it right here. They know right here. They reason among themselves. We say from heaven, we will say, if they say from men, but if we say from men, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that Billy Bob was a prophet. What does it say? It says John was a prophet. So they believe that John's a prophet, sent from God. So what do they see the trap? See what's going on here? Okay. And I'm not saying this just to praise about whoever the present president is. Did he not let them trap them themselves? In most of these cases, right there. Now, when it comes to us, what do we do with this information we've got crammed up in our head? And how do we confront someone that says, well, the thief on the cross is different, therefore that negates having to have water baptism? How do you deal with that? Turn and run? I'll get back to you? As a professing Christian, what should you know about that situation? It says be baptized, yeah. But in that situation, they use that as an out for being baptized. Sometimes they'll even say, well, baptism is just a baptism of the mind. It's all about the mind. Well, I won't argue with that. But what does it say about water baptism? And what do we know about, remember last week a word started with M, mikvah. Remember what a mikvah is? It's in essence, it's a pool. It's like a bathtub. And it's for cleaning yourselves, especially the priests. Before the priests could go into, gee whiz, in the temple there, before they could go into certain places, they had to be absolutely clean. Cleanliness is, what do we think about cleanliness? Being clean. I mean, do you want to go into a bathroom that's just filthy and dirty at a truck stop or someplace like that? I just use that as an extreme example. But what about it? Do you want to eat off a dinner table where a cat's been wandering around on it, sitting there and doing things that cats do? Well, what kind of cleanliness is that? Well, what about our own cleanliness when it comes to our mind? What about the widow that gave everything that she had? How clean was her mind there? You think about these things and you apply it to self. That's part of what Scripture is supposed to do. It's application to self. You don't learn it and then ignore it. Because at the end of the day, the ultimate authority will show you. He will prove to you that I do what I say. Let me read something I pulled off. Well, I'll just go back. I would back up. I intended to use this to start the lesson this morning, but just, why are you here this morning? How many times have you heard me say that before? A bunch of times. Over the how many years I've been up here talking? A bunch of times. I can't even keep track of it. And there's a difference between H-E-R-E and H-E-A-R. There's a big difference there. You're here to hear, but you're here to be here. Right? And now, is that a bunch of gibberish or what? Are you only here for your own benefit? Sure. But do we spread the benefit around, or we just hide it in a closet someplace? What happens when it's time to speak up and you don't? Read this. The knowledge from the Bible is solely for your benefit only. Only for you. There's a whole lot of U's in here, isn't there? And I'm not spelling that E-W-E with a S on the end. You know what an E-W-E is? It's a sheep, okay? What are we called? How do you feel when someone calls you, oh, you're just a sheep? You know, for being religious. You can do anything you want. Just go on out there and just have a good time. It's to the point now where, hey, go out and murder somebody. The judge will let you go. Just because you weren't raised here in America or something like that. Some other silly nonsense. Read this. Can't remember where I copied this from, but I did copy it. Real religion is never a second-hand thing. It is a personal discovery. The gospel of personal experience. How much of your own personal experience do you apply to yourself to say, I don't want to do that anymore? I don't want to teach people, other people that are in the same situation as I found myself in one time. Anybody ever ask you after you became a Christian, you know, hey, you used to do this. Did you come back? No, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. For me, in my profession, I'm around rough people all the time. I deal with rough people. And from time to time, I've been able to make a little bit of difference just simply by being able to use scriptural references or alluding to them about what would happen without the scripture. Because time and time again, we find that without the controlling element of this Bible, mankind would be what? Lost? We're a murderous bunch of people. I don't like them. I'm going to take a club and I'm going to beat his head in. Those sort of things. Well, there is a religion in this world right now that teaches those sort of things. You don't agree with us? We'll give you 2 or 3 options, and if you don't want any of those options, off your head. Judge, jury, and executioner all in one thing here. So, with a lot of these thoughts back in here, let's pick back up and let's read in verse 3. Jesus answered and said to them, I will ask you a question, and you tell me. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? His question establishes what? John's authority. What was John? He was a prophet, wasn't he? A prophet to lead people to. It was written about, wasn't it? Now, if I remember correctly, who was John's father? Zacharias. Who was he a descendant of? All those guys were supposed to be high priests from then on. It's estimated that at that point in time there were something like 20,000 high priests. But now how many of them actually gravitated into this situation, I don't know. But you think about that. And who was he married to? Okay? He was married to somebody else whose father was a high priest. See the situation? If you can read Scripture and you know a little bit of the history behind it, all of a sudden all of these things start to tie together. So rather than just learning a few of the obvious verses, the whole point behind this lesson is rather than just learning a few verses in this, dig in, because you will be confronted with people that are studying the Bible, but somewhere along the way you're going to cross swords with them, so to speak. Because the whole point behind us is to teach this correctly. Don't change it. Don't try to take advantage of it for yourself or someone else. It's to teach it correctly. And to go run and hide because you don't know. There's a simple solution to that. Just say, I do not know, but let me go away and study this. And I'll come back to you with an answer. Would that be the right way to handle that? Because who in here knows everything there is to know about this Bible? I can't hold my hand up. The more I study it, the more I realize my ignorance about what I don't know. And that's one of the things that makes me grateful to be able to stand up here and speak. Okay? I take advantage of people that have studied it more than me. So, what do you think about the people that might have translated this New American Standard? How many people can one guy go in there and just translate the whole thing? There's been attempts. There's several Bibles out there named after some of the people that have done those sort of things. Well, how much work have you got to put into it? Who's going to pay you for it? Somewhere along the way, we got to be able to eat. So, with this question of authority, I took the liberty of writing down here, and those of you that know me, here's my writing. This is one entire paragraph right here, okay? I write extremely small. So I thought I would take advantage of reading what William Barclay had to say about this. This is, you know, I wasn't able to completely finish this because we'll take it up next week because I know I'm running out of time, but I'll see if I can read this in the next 2 or 3 minutes. And hopefully, let's put our mind to work on this. Luke 20, verses 1 through 8. It says, the first question was put to the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. The chief priests were a body of men composed of ex-high priests and of members of the families from which the high priests were drawn. The phrase describes the religious aristocracy of the temple. The 3 sets of men, chief priests, scribes, and elders, were the component parts of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin. I'm not sure about this, but does the Sanhedrin still exist in Israel today? I don't know. I haven't studied that. If someone could look that up, I would like to know. I may remember to look it up this week, and if I do, I'll tell you next week. The Sanhedrin. It says, parts of the Sanhedrin, the supreme council and governing body of the Jews. And we may as well take it that this was a question concocted by the Sanhedrin with a view formulating a charge against Jesus. What were they trying to do? They knew they couldn't kill him. They couldn't personally kill him. They had to fix this deal, didn't they, some way? And what was their answer to it? Sometime just not too far distant in the future. What was their answer on how to get someone else to do it for them? What was the charge that they told Pilate? Blasphemy. I am God incarnate. Okay? That's the reason why they were asking the thing about authority. What's he turned it back around on? Well, by whose authority are you saying this? Saying these things. Some more Barclay. No wonder they asked him by what authority he did these things. To ride into Jerusalem as he did and then take the law into his own hands and cleanse the temple required some explanation. But what was foretold about Jesus? He's doing exactly what Scripture said was going to happen. And these guys are supposed to know this. What is a Christian supposed to know? Every little detail in the Bible? Well, yeah, that would be really nice, wouldn't it? But I don't know too many people that can go verse by verse, word by word in this thing. But is it just critical that we can explain some of the high points? Baptism being one of the main points. You think about that. Baptism seems to be making a little bit of comeback in this country. Here lately I've been seeing that, been reading about it. But for how long have we had people up there saying, all you got to do is come down to the front and confess and you're good to go. It stops right there. You lead them right to the point and no mas. The buzzers rang. If I've said anything that's wrong, please let me know. Next week we're going to get into more detail, and hopefully you'll find this worthy of your time. Anything I've said that's wrong or in error, please let me know. Thank you.